Welcome to my show. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today the Astrology Star Sisters are going to talk about the 2025 Planetary Pile-up in Pisces, water to fire. And my Astrology Star Sister today is Simon. Welcome, Simon. How you doing today?
Oh, decent enough. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a busy day, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So Simon's website is iconalchemy.com and my website is alightpath.com. And we're going to talk about the dance between water and fire in 2025, and it does also go into 2026. And we're going to talk about the sign of Pisces, which is a water sign. It's a mutable sign. And the mantra is I imagine. It's the eldest sign. It's the ending of the 12 signs, or it's the 12th sign, so it's the last one. Would you like to give us some keywords about Pisces, Simon, please?
So, Pisces has the quality of being visionary, empathic, intuitive, emotionally sensitive. The caution here is that it can be self-pitying, confused, escapist, and impractical. It's more attuned to the spiritual realms than the practical earthly realms.
Thank you. And then we're going to be talking about Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac. It's a cardinal fire sign, and the mantra is I am. It's the youngest sign, the beginning. And would you give the keywords for Aries, please?
Ambitious, adventurous, decisive, executive function, and courage. The caution is that this is a sign that can be overly aggressive, authoritarian, impulsive, and has a fiery temper.
And then we have this planetary pileup in Pisces. And this picture here is the astrology chart on February 18th when the sun ingresses into Pisces, and that happened today. And going from water to fire as the planets are grouping up in that Pisces.
And heading into Aries.
Yes, thank you. You wanted to start talking about the precursor, please?
Okay, so first, just to kind of give an overview, we've got a whole bunch of stuff that's all been going into Pisces, and it's going to be there for a sizable portion of the period from February through March. Okay, and all of these are eventually going to head into Aries, well, except for the North Node. But over the course of February and March, we're going to have a little bit of back and forth between Pisces and Aries. And so this elemental dance of water and fire is going to be prominent for the next 6 weeks or so. Okay, so on February 27th, we're going to have a new moon in Pisces. And we see here we've got the sun, the moon, Ceres, Saturn, Mercury, the North Node, and Neptune, all in Pisces. Okay. And then Venus, Chiron, and Aries are all together. Or Venus, Chiron, and Eris are all together in Aries. And this is kind of sets the stage for when Venus is going to station retrograde, I believe, on March 1st. Okay. Having gone into Aries already, having given us just a little taste of that fire in the midst of all of this watery stuff that's going on. Okay. And then Venus is going to retrograde back through Aries and back into Pisces. Okay. So we're already, we can see from when the sun entered Pisces today. We already have a lot going on in Pisces. And so we're already starting to feel like this almost waterlogged sense of things with so many planets in this water sign. And keep in mind that Mars, who rules Aries, is also in a water sign right now. So lots and lots of watery feeling going on.
The emotions could be flowing at this time.
Oh, definitely.
And then here we have the lunar eclipse on March 13th, which is the Virgo full moon also. And it's illustrating where the planets are. In Pisces, we have Ceres, Saturn, Sun, North Node, and Neptune. And then in Aries, we have Venus, Mercury, Chiron, and Eris. Continuing from what we had on the slide before, is there anything else you'd like to talk about with this lunar eclipse slide?
Okay, so here we can see Venus at this point is retrograde, and I know that Liz and I are going to be talking about Venus's retrograde as well as Mercury's retrograde in an upcoming show. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means at that point. But Venus, of course, is the planet of love and beauty and pleasure and wealth, the connective principle. And in Aries, she is, considered to be in her detriment. She's in a place where she's more impulsive. We have more difficulty with delaying gratification when Venus is in this sign. And there's this kind of, bold, decisive quality. We saw earlier, Aries can be associated with aggression. Okay. And so, think about somebody who walks into a room and is very, very bold and upfront with their sensuality, with their desire to connect, aggressive friendliness we can associate with Venus and Aries. Okay. But now at this point, she has entered into her retrograde. She is now heading back toward Pisces, which is the sign of her exaltation. We had Venus conjoined with Neptune and the North Node at the beginning of February. And that may have given us some kind of, romantic inclinations or spiritual desires that then Venus is going to be revisiting as she heads back to reconnect with Neptune and the North Node in Pisces. Mercury at this point of the lunar eclipse is not yet has not yet stationed retrograde, but is slowing and getting ready for that station. And of course, eclipses, this lunar eclipse is in Virgo. Eclipses can be sort of cosmic wild cards. They're like a great big reset button. Okay. And so they affect change on the axis of the nodes. Okay. So within the signs of Pisces and Virgo is where we can expect to see changes that are connected to the eclipse. And in this case, it's a lunar eclipse. So that's going to relate to our emotions and our instincts and our knee-jerk reactions. It can also relate to our bodily health, okay, or the shape and use of our bodies, not simply our health. Okay, how are we embodied? We see with the moon. And the moon in Virgo is also particularly health conscious. Okay, it's detail oriented. We have an instinct to get down into the fine tuning of things. There can be perfectionist qualities. with that moon in Virgo. Okay. And here, because it's a lunar eclipse happens at a full moon, then it's opposing that sun in Pisces, which is conjoining the North Node and Neptune, and also loosely conjoined by Saturn. And so that suggests a serious quality, but also some spiritual depth. There is that sense of fatefulness of moving toward something for the sun, but with the moon is at the south node. And so we may feel a bit depleted or exhausted at the time of that lunar eclipse. And now think of that within the context of this Pisces pile-up, where we've got so many planets in a sign that is at the end of the zodiac, that is a mutable sign. And so it's that kind of, there is that fine-tuning energy, but also this releasing energy, this trying to adapt to things and finish things up and move around things. But also there's this deep depth of feeling that we see with Pisces. Our imaginations are stirred, our tendency to daydream, but also we can have some real escapist tendencies show up. Okay. And so there's this interesting dynamic with this eclipse of it's a practical moon that is getting eclipsed. And so we may find our practicality, like we have this urge to, get things right, quote unquote, and then it suddenly flies out the window. Right? Like, oh, wait a minute, where did that go? It was there just a moment ago, and now what? And when we've got so much in Pisces, then we can feel like we are lost in the fog and kind of, swimming along through things. There is definitely the impetus to go with the flow, because that North Node is in Pisces, moving us toward the being in flow states, and away from the fine-tune, attention to detail that we see with the moon in Virgo.
Absolutely. That's great. And then we have the solar eclipse on March 29th, which will be 9 degrees Aries for that new moon. Go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so now we see Venus has retrograded back into Pisces, rejoining Neptune and the North Node and Saturn, who are all now getting closer to the end of Pisces. And, Ceres is co-present there, but not quite in the thick of that cluster at the end of Pisces. We see that now the Mercury at this point is retrograde and at 0 degrees of Aries. The sun, this solar eclipse is interesting because it's in the sign of the sun's exaltation. Okay, so the sun would normally be very strong here, except now it's getting eclipsed. And so that's kind of interesting in terms of where our energy might be, where our attention might be, our awareness, our ability to understand things. Aries is very bold, go get 'em kind of energy. In the northern hemisphere, it's all about the kind of the blood quickening in spring. Okay. People and animals and plants all getting active again. And with the sun in Aries, then there's this consciousness that is ready for a new start. But then with the eclipse, again, there's that that consciousness suddenly gets darkened, gets covered with this shadow. And so things are suddenly not normal. Things are there are likely to be changes along the Aries Libra axis. But of course, here we see it's both the moon and the sun in Aries, and then that north node still in Pisces with Neptune. That means we're looking at where are we going, what are we moving toward, and what we are moving toward is now potentially suddenly changed. There is this shift in our conscious awareness, a shift in our intentions, in our sense of purpose. And, again, we're looking at now, there's this balance, greater balance between the watery sign of Pisces and the fiery sign of Aries. We've got pretty much equal numbers of bodies or points in the signs, with Venus having retrograded back into Pisces. Mercury is going to head back into Pisces. So it's almost like this big crescendo of wateriness before things start to move more fully and stay in the sign of Aries.
And when you go from water to fire and back and forth, those two elements, it's like you can make boiling water, you can make steam, the water can put the fire out. So it's like you got a really interesting combination here.
Right. And also remember that water is associated with our emotions and our intuitions, whereas fire is associated with our spirit and our action. And so it's interesting, especially with all of these various planets going across Neptune, who's the slowest of the batch, right? And Neptune relates to our vision, our inspiration, okay? Our spiritual yearnings, our sense of all that is interconnected in life, our compassion for each other, but also our illusions, our delusions, hopes and dreams. And so all of these planets are getting touched by Neptune as they're heading into Aries. And the thing is that Neptune's getting ready to head into Aries, which is part of this much larger shift that's going on with all three of the outer planets and both of the social planets, all changing signs over a 9-month period from last November into July, into early July. And so all of these planets are getting touched by that Neptunian spiritual yearning, that impulse, that imagination, as they head into a sign of new beginnings. Okay. And I really want to emphasize that because with so much that's going on in the world that causes us distress, that is, lots of us can feel pretty down in the dumps, and Pisces can get very depressive, okay? Because it feels so deeply, it's so sensitive and compassionate and empathetic and aware of all the suffering in the world, right? And so this period with all this stuff going on in Pisces, we can have lots of deep feelings, and potentially there can be, some depression and even despair there. Okay. Feeling like, oh, things are so awful and there's so much hurt and suffering, and what do I do about it? And at the same time, here is this as we're ending one cycle, there is this seed for beginning the new cycle with a level of inspiration, a level of compassion for each other, a level of interconnectedness that we're not ever going to quite experience the same way again, right? Because Neptune's going to go into Aries and it's not coming back to Pisces for a long, long time. So we're getting all of these planets colored by Neptune here, experiencing both the sorrow and the inspiration, both the pain and the potential for a beautiful new beginning if we can just envision it. And Neptune offers imagination. Pisces offers imagination and creativity. So it's like all of these things are plunging into that water to then be washed clean and emerge into the newness of first the Aries ingress, and then finally what we're all building up toward here, that Neptune ingress into Aries that's coming up.
Okay. We put in the US Sibley chart, and we use the 5:10 p.m. time because there's different times that people use. And on the IC at the fourth house doorway, we have 1 degrees and 3 minutes of Aries. And we're going to go to the next one to explain all that. Go ahead.
Right. So the Sibley chart is a chart that can be considered as an inception chart for the United States. Okay. Kind of like the United States natal chart. Okay. And so when we're looking then at placements in the Sibley chart, we can then look at transits to those placements and feel like that is that's triggering something for the country as a whole. Okay. And I find it very interesting that we've got all this huge pileup in Pisces that then is going to be emerging into Aries and triggering that point, triggering the IC. Now, what is the IC? The IC is the nadir of the chart. Okay. It is the cusp of the 4th house, which governs home and family. It can be considered to be our roots in the psychic soil, our ancestral line, where we have come from, what is our source, and what are we rooted in? What is our foundation as a country? Okay. And so in this case, we have all these planets are going to be crossing over and activating that foundation, that deep root into ancestry and sense of home and place and sense of where we come from. Okay. And so we see here we've got the sun is going to cross into Aries on March 20th. That will be the Aries ingress. The moon obviously crosses over all the signs once each month. Okay. Mercury is going to enter Aries, then retrograde back across this point, and then retrograde back or move forward back across it one more time. So we'll get 3 hits from Mercury. Same goes for Venus. Okay, all of these things triggering this point. When Jupiter enters Cancer and squares Saturn, Jupiter is going to be squaring that point. Saturn, of course, is going to cross over that point as well. And again, by retrograde action, is going to cross over that point multiple times. Between now and the conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries next February, which is, of course, the big transit that so many astrologers are looking forward to and talking about. The North Node crossed over this point on December 30th, and Ceres will also be crossing over this point in May. And so I want you to think about that for a moment. We've got so many things going across that point, and each one of these planets then is going to bring up different topics for consideration in relation to what constitutes the home of this country, what constitutes its lineage, what constitutes our roots, okay? What are we built upon? And with that much stuff going on, triggering that spot, it does suggest perhaps a bit of a makeover, a reconfiguring of the foundations of the United States, for better or for worse, okay? And, I mean, from the planet's standpoint, they're not so concerned with, is it good or is it bad? It's what we're doing with it that makes it good or bad, right? They're just offering the energies, the insights, the triggers to kind of get us to do what we're going to do with it. Okay. As I mentioned, Neptune hanging around in the last degrees of Pisces for so long before the ingress into Aries at the end of April, Neptune is touching each of these things as they cross over. Okay. In the case of Jupiter, it'll be by square right before Jupiter enters Cancer. Okay. But Neptune is touching these things, offering inspiration, but also offering the reminder of our interconnectedness, offering the reminder that we can choose to lean into our intuitions about these things, that, for those of us who are spiritually inclined, that spiritual awareness needs to be leaned into a bit before we make the decisions about what we're going to do once everything's in Aries. Aries is impulsive. It is not inclined to sit around and stew about things. Okay. The stewing is happening with everything in Pisces. But once these things enter Aries, it's like, it's go time. There's not this, okay, now we're going to sit around and figure out what we're trying to do. We're just going to do it. Rick Levine has a wonderful phrase for this, which is ready, fire, aim. Okay. That's the nature of Aries. Just do. Don't think about it. Don't stew on it. Okay. And so this time of this pileup of stuff going on in Pisces is our time to kind of let our feelings percolate around each of the topics that these planets bring up. Okay. The sun, the light of consciousness. What's our core sense of purpose? What are we here to do? The moon, our feelings about things, our instincts and our knee-jerk reactions. Mercury, our thoughts, our communication, our ideas. What are we trying to communicate to others? As well as things like commerce, okay, and information systems. Venus, our connectivity, our relationships. Mars, our action. What are we going to do? Jupiter, our hope and faith. Saturn, our structure, our discipline, our patience. Okay. As each of these is going into Aries and then hitting that point, that icy point, all of them have input to offer. Okay. And input that, because it's in Aries at that point, it's a it's a mobile input. Okay. So we would do well to spend this time with all these planets in Pisces, letting ourselves imagine, letting ourselves dream about the good possibilities that we can engage, the things that we can set ourselves to do once we're in that mode of doing without thinking about it, right? Having that space right before we hit that time to change the foundation, time to reshape what the United States is about and all the ripples that go out to the rest of the world.
Thank you. That was great. So can you give people a suggestion maybe of how they can use that energy for themselves personally?
Mhm. Right. So, I feel like with so many things in Pisces, this is not a time for clear thinking. This is not a lot of logical time. Okay. Instead, we would really do well to pay attention to our dreams. That includes making sure that you've got the means to write down or record your dreams, um, so that you can then, perhaps use that to gain some understanding of things that aren't necessarily logical, but that can help you. Um, Doing creative activities, okay, doing things that facilitate daydreaming, but also, since Saturn is co-present in Pisces right now, I very much think that for those of us who have spiritual practices, now is the time to get serious about them. Now is the time to lean into them. This is a time for meditation, um, a time for, for those of us who engage in directed prayer or spell work, but not, again, it's not based in logic. It's in that murky space um, that is otherworldly. Okay. This can also be a time to wrap up things. It's big completing energy, right? I also think it's a good time to do things like to work on cultivating our flow states, where we allow ourselves to get really involved with a project, really in depth with it, and and feeling it deeply. Okay, to engage with it deeply. I think for those of us who like to dance, it's a good time to dance. It's also probably good for walks in nature. I think that this is a time when we can really benefit from, um, braving the chill if we're in northern climes, and going outdoors and walking around for a bit. Pisces rules the feet. So using our feet might be helpful, to get us to be in that moving meditation space that then allows insight and inspiration to come to us. And I do think it's, as rough as, the news cycle can be, it is a good idea to not completely separate ourselves from what's going on in the world. Instead, engage with it in moderate doses, and let ourselves feel the compassion and some of the hurt. Not from a standpoint of doom scrolling, okay? We don't want to be abusive to ourselves about it, but we do want to remind ourselves that all of life on this planet is connected. And what happens to life somewhere over there is actually affecting us over here, whether or not we want to admit it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And I would say, yes, walking would be great. Maybe even get a pedicure. And at least the
Right.
weather's warmed up a little bit, so it's a little bit warmer and easier to get outside and walk
Depends on
around.
where
And
you are.
right, for me
The
anyway.
East Coast is under a lot of storm right now. But still, at any point in time that you can get out safely, this is, and as the Pisces pileup continues, the weather is starting to warm. We are getting further, closer towards spring. So as that happens, we should endeavor to get out as much as we can.
Well, that was great. Thank you for sharing all that information. And here's Simon's slide, so I'll let her tell you about that.
So I have a Patreon page where I offer my analysis of the ongoing astrological transits. I have typically weekly posts as well as some monthly and some randomness here and there. And that page is actually based on my practice of doing custom astrological art for my patrons. Art that reflects transits at the time of their solar return, as well as some pieces that are just about kind of current clusters of weather like we're having right now. And like Liz, I am a consulting astrologer, and I can be found at iconalchemy.com in case you wish to schedule a consultation with me. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. And other podcasts that I do, I'll start with Astrology Star Sisters. We do Chinese astrology, decans using astrology and tarot, dwarf planets, fixed stars, planet stationing, Uranian astrology, and the Venus star point. And Simon and I also do the new moon forecast each month. And we have still a few more shows on the astrological highlights of 2025. A new show that'll be coming soon is Magical Astrology with Robert Passetti. Justin and I do the astrology forecast, the full moon forecast, and a Chiron asteroid series. And another new series is a relationship show that we're going to do with Simon, myself, Justin, and Robert. So some things to look forward to. I will be on Talk Cosmos on the Archetypal Symbols team on February 27th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, talking about the Pisces new moon. You can watch it live here or come back and watch it later. I do consultations. I have a newsletter and my YouTube channel, so you can contact me for a consult, and you can sign up for my newsletter and my YouTube channel. I appreciate it, all the support. And again, to get a hold of Simon, it's iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com. So I want to thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you come back soon. And it was a pleasure. Simon, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining us.